remember the night it happened as if it were yesterday. It was the dry season, the time when the ground cracked underfoot and the air smelled of dust and distant fires. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, leaving only the glow of the village hearths. In those days, we all knew better than to stray beyond the last hut after dark. Not because of wild animals or bandits, but because of the Olangi forest. The elders always warned us, never enter the forest at night. There were spirits there, things that walked in silence, waiting for those foolish enough to wander in. But Obinna, may his soul find peace, never listened to warnings. He was the strongest among us, the finest hunter, the fastest runner. His pride was a thick cloak draped over his shoulders, and nothing anyone said could pierce through it. That night we sat under the great baobab tree, our bellies full of roasted yam and palm wine. The old men were telling stories, and the children were dozing off in their mothers' laps. That was when Baba Juma, the oldest man in our village, spoke of the forbidden path. His voice was low, carrying the weight of countless years. "No man who enters the Olangi after dark returns the same," he said, staring ahead with his blind eyes. Obinna laughed. "Then I will be the first." The men shook their heads. The women muttered prayers, and even Kwame, Obinna's closest friend, pulled him aside. "Brother, do not test the spirits," he whispered. "There are things older than us in that forest." But Obinna only grinned. "Then let them hear my name." A foolish wager was made. If Obinna walked through the forbidden path and arrived at the village on the other side by dawn, he would take Kwame's best goat. If he failed, he would surrender his finest bow. It was meant to be a game, a reckless challenge made in the heat of the moment. But the moment he stepped into the forest, something changed. The air grew heavier, thick with moisture. The sounds of the night, crickets, frogs, distant drumming, vanished as if swallowed by the trees. Obinna walked confidently at first, his spear firm in his grip. But the further he went, the more he noticed how unnatural the silence was. Even the wind did not stir the leaves. Then he heard it, a rustling behind him, soft at first, like the shifting of dry leaves, then heavier, footsteps keeping pace with his own. He turned, spear raised. Nothing, only darkness, stretching endlessly between the twisted trees. "Just my mind playing tricks," he muttered, shaking off the unease. He pressed on, but the sound followed, always a few steps behind, never closer, never farther. Then he saw the light, a small fire flickering just ahead. Relief washed over him. Perhaps another traveler, a lost villager. He quickened his pace and emerged into a clearing. A woman stood by the fire. Her kaitenge cloth was old, the patterns faded. She was barefoot, her skin pale under the moonlight. Her face was hidden beneath a hood, but when she spoke, her voice was soft, almost kind. "You walk a dangerous path, hunter," she said. "This is not your place." Obinna frowned. "Who are you?" The woman did not answer. Instead, she reached out, her fingers long and bony. "Turn back now, before it is too late." Something in her voice sent a chill down his spine. But pride is a heavy thing, and Obinna's pride was greater than his fear. "I do not fear shadows," he said, stepping past her. "Let me be." The woman sighed, and as she lifted her head, he saw her face, or rather the absence of it. Where her eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was only smooth skin, blank and unbroken. Obinna stumbled back, a cry catching in his throat. But when he blinked, she was gone. And so was the fire. Now true fear gripped him. He turned and ran, the trees blurring past him. But the path did not end. No matter how fast he moved, the trees never thinned, the forest never opened. The world was endless, an eternal stretch of twisted branches and whispering shadows. Then, out of the silence, came a sound. Drums, deep and slow, beating like a heartbeat. The drums of the dead. He knew them well. The elders had always warned, if you ever hear the drums of Olangi, do not follow, do not turn around, and above all, do not answer when they call your name, Obina. His name drifted through the trees, carried by voices that did not belong to the living. Obina. He squeezed his eyes shut, forced himself to move faster. The ground felt soft beneath him, pulling him down with every step. The air was thick, pressing against his chest. Then, suddenly, silence. When he opened his eyes, he was at the edge of the forest. The first light of dawn kissed the horizon. He had made it, but something was wrong. When he stepped into the village, the people gasped. Mothers clutched their children. The elders whispered among themselves. "What is it?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Then he saw his reflection in a pot of water. His hair had turned completely white. Obina never spoke of what happened in the forest. He no longer laughed at the elders' warnings. He no longer entered the Olangi, not even in daylight. And worst of all, he never heard the drums again, because now they beat within him, and sometimes late at night, when the village is silent and the wind blows through the trees, you can still hear them calling his name.